Charlie's reading, Charlie's needing, Charlie, he's a dandy. Charlie, he's a nice young man, he feeds the girl on candy. Oh, Lordy, that's an old one now, sir. You have got older there. That really is old.
One evening as the sun went down and the jungle fire was burning, down the track came a hobo hiking, and he said, boys, I'm not turning. I'm headed for a land that's far away, beside the crystal fountains. So come with me, we'll go and see the big rock candy mountains. In the big rock candy mountains, there's a land that's fair and bright, where the handouts grow on bushes, and you sleep out every night, where the boxcars all are empty, and the sun shines every day on the birds and the bees and the cigarette trees and the lemonade springs, where the bluebird sings in the big rock candy mountains. In the big rock candy mountains, all the cops have wooden legs, and the bulldogs all have rubber teeth, and the hens lay soft-boiled eggs. There the farmers' trees are full of fruit, and the barns are full of hay. And I'm bound to go where there ain't no snow, and the rain don't fall, and the wind don't blow, in the big rock candy mountains. In the big rock candy mountains, you never change your socks, and the little streams of alcohol come trickling down the rocks. There ain't no short-handled shovels, no axes, spades, or picks, and I'm bound to stay where they sleep all day, where they hung the Turk that invented work, in the big rock candy mountains. In the big rock candy mountains, all the jails are made of tin, and you can walk right out again as soon as you are in. Why, the brakemen have to tip their hats, and the railroad bulls are blind. There's a lake of stew and a gin lake, too. You can paddle all around them in a big canoe, in the big rock candy mountains.
Should I test? Literally. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to For the Common Good, Smithsonian Voices on our Shared Future 250, a series of conversations featuring Smithsonian staff, community partners, and thought leaders exploring how our work illuminates the ideals of a nation and contributes to our shared future. My name is Ashley Grady, and I am very excited to be here. I work for the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, and they're the folks hosting For the Common Good, which is one of the several spotlight programs this summer. Yes. One of the several spotlight programs this summer organized by the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. This program received funding as part of the Smithsonian's Our Shared Future 250 initiative to commemorate the nation's 250th anniversary. So, if you're here, there are a number of QR codes around the room, or if you're watching, visit festival.si.edu for a full schedule of For the Common Good sessions taking place Tuesdays through Saturdays through July 11th. We hope you can join us as we go behind the scenes, discussing the many ways the Smithsonian works for the common good. All of our sessions are being live streamed on YouTube, where they will remain available to watch. We'll be taking questions in the audience, including those of you online, and you can also join the conversation on social media, but make sure to use the hashtag 2026Folklife. ASL interpretation and live real-time captioning are provided, and assisted listening devices are also available. Receivers can be obtained in the back of this room or from the accessibility information table in the marketplace, where you can also find information about accessibility supports and services for all of the Folklife activities happening here in the Arts and Industries building. Speaking of accessibility, I am so pleased to welcome our panelists for this session, Making the Smithsonian Accessible for All Visitors. And I am very delighted to introduce the panel's moderator, Accessibility Program Specialist Ashley Grady from the Smithsonian Office of Visitor Affairs. Take it away, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I want to do a mic check. Is the sound good? Can I get a thumbs up from the back? Thank you so much. I joked with Rachel that I'm not used to a mic in front of my face. We're so excited. Thank you for joining our panel today. As Ashley said, my name is Ashley Grady, and I'm the Accessibility Program Specialist in the Office of Visitor Accessibility. I'm joined by my amazing colleagues, Emma, Diane, and Geoffrey, who are going to introduce themselves in just a few minutes. Before we get started, though, I wanted to give the audience a quick background about accessibility at the Smithsonian Institution. Our office, the Office of Visitor Accessibility, was actually formed in 1991 and has spent the last 35 years striving to be an international leader in inclusive design and all things accessibility. Because we are a central office, we have the great fortune of working with all 21 Smithsonian museums, our National Zoological Park, and our 14 education and research centers all across the world. OVA's mission is to be a catalyst for integrated and consistent inclusive design for people with disabilities at the Smithsonian. We accomplish this in many ways: staff and volunteer training, developing policy and guidelines like our Smithsonian Guidelines for Accessible Exhibition Design. Say that 5 times fast. We also serve on a lot of pan-institutional working groups or project teams to advise on accessibility. We also host a lot of public programs, like Morning at the Museum, which is a sensory-friendly program for individuals who are neurodivergent and their families, or See Me at the Smithsonian, which is a virtual program for adults with dementia and their caregivers. We also review a lot of exhibition and facilities design plans to make sure that our structures are physically accessible. And lastly, we also, I think most importantly, do a lot of outreach to the disability community to make sure that disabled visitors are actually leading the conversations that we're having and informing the work that we do. And so with that, I would like each of my panelists, if they would, be so kind to introduce yourself, tell us where you work, a little bit about what your role is at the Smithsonian, and maybe any accessibility programs you want to highlight to kick us off. Emma, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Emma. I am the manager of visitor accessibility and programs at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York. My role really reaches every part of the museum. I work with nearly everyone who works at Cooper Hewitt. My role ranges from working on access programs with the disabled community, to working on our exhibitions, to our visitor experience and facilities, all types of projects we're working on. And I'm a white Latina woman with big curly hair and a black shirt outfit today. Is that everything?
Sure.
Yeah.
Diane, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diane Nutting. I'm the Accessibility Program Manager for Smithsonian Folklife and the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. I am a white middle-aged woman with shoulder-length brownish blonde hair. I'm wearing a rust-colored shirt this morning. I also, like Emma, kind of touch everything that is involved with the festival and with our programming, which is actually why I love my job, is that I get to work with everyone. Really thinking about how accessibility is not just something that's added on at the end, but something that's woven into the fabric as we design our experiences, and we'll talk more about that as we design our spaces. So thinking about that, this year is particularly exciting because in addition to the on-site and DC programming that we're doing, we're also doing work across the country. In our Of the People initiative that's working in collaboration with 40+ festivals and events around the country. So having conversations with them about accessibility and their journey is really, really exciting as well. I like everything we do. I would say I really love our audio described tours. They seem to be one of the great things about the festival is that we are often a sort of a please touch museum, if you will, a hands-on experience, and to be able to then amplify that for individuals is really, really exciting. So I'll turn it over to Geoffrey.
Hi, I'm Geoffrey Cohrs. I'm the docent coordinator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, or SAM, as we like to call it. We also manage the Renwick Gallery over by the White House. I'm a middle-aged man. I don't like to say that, but I am, with short hair, a goatee, and I'm wearing a wine-colored button-up. So I am, like I said, I'm the docent coordinator at SAM, and my main job is to basically oversee the in-person docent corps and all the programs that they do, which includes just general highlights tours, school tours, and of course our access programs. And we have 4 sort of main access programs. We have one for a tour in ASL called Art Signs. We do a program for folks who are low vision or blind called America Insight. And then we also work with the Office of Visitor Affairs on the CME program. And then the final program that we sort of have is our eye-popping art tour, which are for visitors who are colorblind.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing so much about your work. I think we definitely want to highlight some of the individual efforts that you're doing at your unit locations. But to kick us off, I wanted to kind of, think about how we center disability, like in our spaces at the Smithsonian, and maybe to Emma, if you want to kick off, how are we inviting people with disabilities into our spaces? How are we demonstrating that we are centering disability in our exhibitions, in our public programs, in our staff representation? And if each of you could speak to that, that would be great. Emma, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think Cooper Hewitt does a lot of great work working with community organizations, people that are already connecting with disability community, have good relationships with people with disabilities, and finding ways to make our invitation to these communities the most accessible that they can be. It's a really great way to invite people into a space through a trusted partner that they know that they're going to be welcomed. This community organization, they've already taken care of them in a variety of ways. And so when they're invited to come to Cooper Hewitt through that organization, it's a really great kind of already first step that you're going to have a good experience. For the independent visitor, people that just come through our doors, having access resources visible is also a really, really important thing. We've started putting our large print labels in our exhibitions just out right by the introductory text for anyone who wants to use them can pick them up. Also just signage throughout on our VE desk, and also making sure that our website has access resources clear and available right when you're entering the website to plan your visit. I think I'll pass the mic now. Well,
Yeah. Do you want to go or should I go? Yeah, okay. I use a phrase that my colleagues here in the audience are going to nod their heads, hopefully, where I say intentional invitation. And it's interesting. I started using that phrase when I first started working at the festival. And over the years, it has really developed into what that means. What I meant when I started was I want folks, when they come into one of our events or come on site, to be aware that accessibility exists, right? So signage, like you said, having things out and accessible and clear and sending the message that we are an accessible and inclusive space. Over the years, that definition of intentional invitation has really developed for me. And what it has become for me in my practice and in the practice that we put forth at Folklife is that we don't want an individual with a disability to have to go through extra work to figure out if they are welcome in our space. And so it's not only the on-site messaging, it's the it's reaching out to communities and extending intentional invitation. It is making sure that our website has an accessibility page that is very detailed and provides a lot of information, as I know both my colleagues have here as well, that really just extends so that, and there's still a number to call for questions, of course, but we are really making sure that, that we are doing that. And then what's really also great is that at Folklife and at the Folklife Festival, we have also really begun to be intentional in making sure that representation is part of what we put forth and making sure that disabled voices are heard within the work that we are doing in cultural heritage.
I'm going to build on what Diane just said and just sort of start with the idea that the Smithsonian is for everybody. We like every unit or every museum, at the Smithsonian really wants any visitor to be able to come in to the museum and see themselves, see their communities in those galleries. And that's particularly true at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. We really want our visitors to see themselves. And that includes people who have disabilities. And sort of building on the idea of the sort of intentional invitation, it's also just making sure that the space itself supports people with various different needs. Things like having benches in as many galleries as we can, or making sure that our labels are between the background color of the label itself and the text, there's a high enough contrast so people with low vision can read them, or the font size on those labels is large enough. You know, people, everybody experiences some sort of long-term condition that can affect their ability to access, whether it's buildings or information or whatever it may be at some point in their life. And so we want to make sure that as an institution that people can come here without doing extra work and still experience the Smithsonian and still experience art and history, culture and science and all the great work that we do. And so that's really sort of where I sort of come from.
Yeah, I love hearing the three of you talk. A word that really comes to mind for me is community. And that really is what we're trying to build, right? Is we're trying to build community within the Smithsonian. I remember when I took over the Morning at the Museum program in 2015, and I was the special education teacher for many years before, All I inherited was an email list in Excel that had about 500 names on it. And they said, run this program. And I said, okay. And I sent every single person on that email or on that list an email to try to, like Emma, you said, build that trust, put a face to a name to when we talk about accessibility at the Smithsonian, we actually mean it. And we want to create that trust that goes both ways. And I think that a lot of times when individual Smithsonian units have really tried to collaborate with the Office of Visitor Accessibility, but also kind of have your own autonomy, right? And learn to create those individual connections yourselves. And Geoffrey, if you wouldn't mind, because especially I would love it if you could talk about one of your newer programs, Eye-Popping Art. Eye-Popping Art. And, you know, Jeff, you've really, again, taken concepts like visual description tours for people who are blind or have low vision, or tours in American Sign Language led by deaf docents, See Me, Morning at the Museum, but also have kind of built this grassroots following at SAM with your programming. Can you talk a little bit about how you've done that and maybe any lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things I learned when I started working in accessibility was what was the phrase? Nothing for us without us. Meaning that when you develop a program or you're putting infrastructure in your museum, you need to talk to the people who you're targeting, right? Who is the program for? And so with the most recent access program that I developed, the Eye-Popping Art Tour, one of the very first things that I knew I needed to do is I needed to talk to experts in vision, specifically when it came to colorblindness, and sort of learn what is colorblindness, how it affects sight, how it affects individuals, but also talk to people who have colorblindness. In my situation, my father had colorblindness, and we have a docent who's also colorblind. So those are like the first two people I could talk to, but pretty quickly, we also created sort of like an advisory group, and then we worked with an outside organization to find user testers to sort of come in and go on like a tour and give us feedback so we could improve the program and make sure it's meeting their needs. And when you do that, you know, you have an opportunity to sort of meet people, to talk to them, to build relationships and trust. And we could put them on our, email lists to send them notices about when the next program is. We could ask for advice if we wanted to sort of refresh the program. So really building and maintaining those relationships are really important, but it really begins at the very beginning of a program before you even have a program to begin with. It's just basically an idea. You need to start talking to the people you want to serve and build those relationships and talk to them and find out what they want. Because if you're making something and they don't want it, then why'd you make it?
I love that, Geoffrey. And I wonder, Emma, if you could kind of follow that thread because, you're relatively new to Cooper Hewitt. You've been there for about a year. And I think there were some programs and initiatives that you kind of inherited, but you also came in with a couple of new ideas, things that you really wanted to implement. And again, having that user expert feedback model was a really important component of how you built some of your new programs. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the programs that I'm most excited about is our Design Night program. It's an iteration on the Morning at the Museum program. Being in New York City, it is really hard to get anywhere generally. It's a huge city, and especially for a museum that has a visitor base that's out in New Jersey, or some people even commute from Connecticut. To get anywhere at 9 a.m. on a Saturday is hard, but in New York City, it's especially difficult. And so the Morning at the Museum program, while really successful, wasn't necessarily the best fit for what would be a fantastic, great experience for our visitors in our area. So what we pivoted to was this program called Design Night, where it's now an after-hours, sensory-friendly happy hour for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities and also adults who identify as autistic. This program shifted audience age slightly, also because New York City has a ton of programming for youth who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. But there's kind of a gap in programming for transition age adults who are now maybe out of school and finding jobs and finding new social life outside of school. There's not really that in-between supportive environment where you can go and have a drink and hang out. Most people aren't really just going out to a bar, but also you don't necessarily want to just stay at home or stay in your community all the time. So this Design Night program is meant to be that in-between supportive space where people can come, hang out, have a drink at the museum, do a fun design activity, explore our exhibitions, but in a more adult environment and at a time that works for everyone. So it's been a really fun. We've hosted one program so far. Our next one is July 10th. So if you're in the New York City area, come out. We'd love to have you. But yeah.
I love it. I love it. And so, Emma, you brought up something interesting, which are kind of sometimes those unexpected environmental barriers, right? Which we definitely see that to a certain extent in Washington, D.C., and our area is certainly true in New York. And that actually leads me to my next question to Diane, who, for those of us listening, Diane is the queen and the leader in our field in terms of working. Oh, see, she's getting, for those at home, she's getting rounds of applause in the audience. This is wonderful. Diane, you've become such a leader in, kind of developing these temporary spaces, folklife festivals, outdoor events. How do you do it, Diane? and are there things, thinking about folks that might be listening at home, are there special kind of factors that you have to take into consideration when we're thinking about flexibility and unexpected, potentially physical or other transportation barriers that might be there?
So many barriers. So it's interesting. I feel like it's a two-part question because a lot of times people are like, how do you do accessibility for an outdoor event? And I'm like, okay, well, the tenets of it are still the same. The tenets are the same, right? We're thinking about people who, might move through the space differently. We're looking at how information is being communicated, either visually or orally, and we're thinking like, how can we create access to that? How can we create equitable experience? We're thinking about folks who process. So that doesn't change if you're in a brick mortar space. What does change is that generally, when we're just talking specifically about the Folklife Festival, we are in an outdoor space, and, we're usually there from late June to early July, which, as you all know, is an extremely, very comfortable time outside in Washington, D.C., as those of you listening online, I think the heat index today is 106, so we're sweltering. And so I'm thinking about things like that. I will say shout out to our tech team and our production team who are already thinking about space. The ADA National Network has a great resource, temporary event accessibility, I think it's called. And it's great because it does talk about things like making sure you have enough restrooms, making sure you have, that your approaches to tents and things like that have the right width. That said, we can make things to code. Like, for instance, we have, we're like, oh, this bench or this table needs to be this high. Great. But now we're sort of partially on a tree stump or, or a tree root, or there's a trash can right here or a light pole that cannot be moved. So we have to kind of think about those things. Then we have just Mother Nature, pigeons, other little critters running around the National Mall, right? And I will say the weather issue is because sometimes, for those of you who've been to the Folklife Festival, if there is lightning in the area, we have to shut down the space and we have to have everyone move into either a museum or into a secured space. Right? There's a lot of banging in the building for those of you hearing that. So we have to think about how are we doing that? How are we getting our folks with disabilities to a, to a safe space? How are we thinking about that? How are we using that? So it's a lot of thinking about that. But then the other interesting thing about outdoor and temporary events is that you're often doing things that wouldn't happen in a brick and mortar space, right? So you're, you're dealing with events and spaces like, oh, there's going to be a tightrope walker here, or gee, there's going to be a big top in the center of the mall, or, we're doing this really, I'm looking at one of our program coordinators, we're doing, when we celebrated Armenia, we did an event called Vardavar, which is something that happens in the Armenian culture, and it's about a blessing of water, and people throw water on each other, and it's just sort of a surprise thing that happens on this one particular day in the calendar. And when I heard this, my ears perked up, and I was like, maybe we should think about how we let folks know who need to know about that ahead of time. I think we had, I'm looking at Arlene, we had a Vardavar space, if memory serves, that was like sort of, if you would like to throw water on your friends, please come to this space. And again, it was very hot, so many people took advantage. So yeah, it's about thinking about accessibility. Nothing changes about accessibility. It's just, how do you make it work creatively? So it's using that creative brain, which I think everybody on this stage uses.
Yeah, definitely. I think creativity, and even as you were telling that story, Diane, you mentioned a lot of different people. So collaboration, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's another thing that all four of us really, really rely on is cross collaboration with each other, with central offices. Obviously, we've talked about communicating. I'm working with the disability community, but Emma, this is one of the things you and I had talked about when we were planning, is just, yes, accessibility is your full-time job, but it's everybody's responsibility. Can you talk to us a little bit about that cross-museum work? Maybe kick off that discussion?
Yeah. I say this all the time, but access work is everyone's work. We all do accessibility, whether we know it or not, whether it's intentional or not. Like holding the door open for someone that's carrying a lot of groceries, or holding the door open for somebody that's disabled. Both acts are acts of access work. You're creating access to a space for someone else, and with someone else. And so a lot of my job is also getting my colleagues to think intentionally about disabled people in their work. It's a mindset shift. To think about the work that you're doing already as access work. A lot of times, access work isn't something that you add on top, and it shouldn't be something that you add on top. It should be incorporated from the very, very beginning. And so thinking about access work in your everyday life, whether you are a visitor engagement person working at the front desk selling tickets, or you're the facilities manager thinking about renovations to our building, or exhibitions teams thinking about the design of labels and things like that, to our, I don't know, I could keep listing other colleagues that I work with on a day-to-day level. But access work is really, really collaborative all the time, and communicating with each other about it is just so important.
Yeah, Jeff or Diane, do you want to follow up on that, or should we move on?
Just to emphasize that it really is everyone's job, and it starts from the very, very beginning. Whether it's security, our security, office, they have, for example, they're the ones who are going to help visitors who need wheelchairs. They're the ones who grab their wheelchairs for those visitors, right? If the visitor doesn't have a wheelchair themselves. It's education. I'm in the education office at SAM, and we do a lot of access. It's exhibitions. It's every department. It's every team. And it needs to, as Emma said, it needs to start at the very, very beginning.
And but to make that happen, you have to empower folks, and education is empowerment.
Yeah.
So I know all of us do a lot of facilitation and education within our own units to talk to folks and get them on board, because a lot of times I find that folks are just afraid of doing the wrong thing.
Correct.
Right? So they won't do anything. So it's just about, we think about how are we providing that information. So for instance, we have a accessibility tip guide that everyone onboarding to the festival gets. and I'm not sure if everyone reads it, but they have it there as a resource, right? So that's there. Accessibility is often woven in, and we have conversations about it. So, when we're in meetings and we're thinking about things, we're like, what about accessibility? Yeah. When we do our site and safety training, accessibility has a module as part of that. Like, there's consistent, it's not just like, hey, you came to one workshop one day in the 10 years of your work here, and now you're an expert. It's continuing, because accessibility is also a journey. Things are constantly shifting and changing and adjusting. And so we want to make sure that folks feel empowered. And what I love is when one of my colleagues comes up to me before I've even had a chance to think about something and been like, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to make this part of the festival accessible? How are we going to, and I love that, because then we're problem solving. We're creatively problem solving together. It's not, the ADA police is here to tell you to do it differently, which is not how I approach accessibility. I don't think it's how anyone on this stage approaches accessibility. Correct. It's about a conversation. It's about it's about a collaboration. It's working together and weaving accessibility into what you do, and becomes part of the workplace culture.
Yeah, definitely. I had written down and was going to say the same thing, Diane, that it really is a journey, and this work is never finished. And I think that's one thing that sometimes when we're with colleagues or clients or friends or colleagues, they're just like, just give me a checklist and tell me what to do. And I always joke that there is no accessibility checklist. There are certain things that we do regularly or sometimes repeatedly, but this work is always evolving, which I think is a good segue. There are cheers in the back of the room. I think is another good segue to something I wanted to ask, which was on the idea of evolution. Has your practice or your approach to this work evolved over time? I know mine has. Again, like, I was a special education teacher for 10 years. I came to the Smithsonian specifically to start an internship program for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which was a smashing success. But even for me, coming from a special education bubble, in a way, it's a very unique type of accessibility in teaching, right? To being much more centered in disability rights, disability justice, my practice had to evolve and change. Have either all three of you seen any type of evolution, maybe in the approach of your work, or maybe any tips for folks out there? Diane.
I mean, so language, right?
Yep.
I think we never like to talk about language but it's a big...
It changes all the time.
It changes all the time. It changes all the time. And that's something that I think, I look back at things that I did, 15, 20 years ago in this field, and I'm like, ooh, wouldn't say that anymore, right? So I think language is always shifting. I think the climate is always shifting too. We just need to keep that at the forefront, and keep thinking about that and what that means and where folks are at, both in terms of trust and everything else.
Yes.
Technology has changed. I consistently think about, I look at ADA guidelines sometimes and I think, okay, but when were these last updated? And wheelchairs are bigger, things are, and I'm always thinking about, but what does that mean now? I believe in the ADA guidelines, there is still no mention around sensory environment, if I'm correct. And that is a huge part of what we do now. Right. And so, I think our practices are changing in that way. Yeah. But I think one of the things also for me, because when I was younger in this field, it was very much about like, you're doing, I was a little like the ADA police, because I kind of I wanted it to be perfect and I wanted everyone to have equality, and that's great. But I think what I have learned is that you have to meet folks where they're at and sort of take that journey with them. And you cannot do everything at once.
Yeah.
You just can't.
What?
And so, yeah. So I know, why not? Let's do everything at once. But it's, you have to make those adjustments. What about you? What have you found?
Yeah, on that topic of not being able to do everything at once, I am a disabled access worker. I come from a whole family of disabled people in a variety of different ways. I have in disabled community in my friend groups also, and we have colleagues that are disabled. I think there's one of the statistics most updated is more than 1 in 4 people in the United States experience disability. And
over 80% you are not a parent.
Yes.
That's the other thing.
Over 80% not a parent. That also does not include temporary disabilities or the effects of aging. As the population ages, disability comes with age. But on that topic of not being able to do everything all at once, the way that I've approached focus groups and hearing from disabled people has shifted. The way, typically a focus group, you bring in a whole group of people with diverse experiences, and we know that one person's experience is not representative of the whole disability community, let alone the disability that they might identify with. So typically focus groups happen with a whole wide variety of people. You're hearing from a ton of different perspectives, and that works in some environments, but also in our museum environment. What I've found for empowering colleagues to do access work meaningfully and purposefully is creating relationships with people. Access work is always relational. A lot of times things are funded because somebody's mother experiences dementia or somebody's cousin is autistic. And so relationships with people with disabilities, or you yourself identify as disabled and are doing this work yourself. So having consultants that work one-on-one with our teams more deeply has been really successful in identifying ways that we can scale access work over time to make more meaningful, smaller changes that'll make the difference in the long run. Yeah, I don't know, Jeff, if you want to add on.
Yeah, I think for me, the way that I've sort of, my sort of mindset of accessibility and disability have changed over time. I think the first big thing is the fact that, as Diane was just saying about the sort of how many people experience, or Emma was saying this too, experience disability throughout their life, there's also the other component of that, which is disability not only as a legal definition or a physical condition or mental condition, it's also an identity. Yes. And there are a lot of people, in fact, I would say the majority of, quote, disabled, unquote, people are probably don't think of themselves as disabled. They don't have that identity. And so they might not advocate for themselves. They might not know there are things out there that they can access to help them. And so sort of like keeping that in mind, that as much as it is a legal or physical or whatever it might definition it might have, it is also an identity that you have to keep aware of. And then the other big thing that's sort of changed for me over the years is that I've really embraced the idea of adaptability. Like accessibility is also adaptability. Yeah. Because as you were saying, Diane, things change all the time, and language being a really good example of that. But then also with new technologies, with just new needs, new maybe categories of disability defined, because that's the other thing too about disability is it's always existed. We might not have always defined it as disability. Mm-hmm. And so when we start defining it as a disability that needs access, that means a whole host of new things that we have to think about and consider and really be conscious of.
And then with that adaptability comes choice, right? Yeah. I know one of my colleagues always says, accessibility is about choices. Yes. And about offering a variety of choices and letting the person make the decision for themselves about how they want to access the material.
Yeah. And on that, accessibility is for everyone. And so if somebody doesn't identify as disabled, they might not go to your access resource page because they maybe have a preconceived idea, I'm not disabled, I don't need those resources, versus when you're providing accessibility and making your resources available to everyone, easily available to everyone, even people who don't maybe politically identify as disabled will take advantages of the resources that they might use in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've got time for maybe one more question before we turn it over to Q&A with the audience in person and online. And I really kind of love that we're, I think, circling back to where we started: relationships, community, communication, cross-collaboration. And then Geoffrey brings up identity, right? And ending with disability is also an identity that a lot of people are very proud of, and we want to honor that pride, right, at the Smithsonian. And then kind of Diane and Emma taking us home with this idea that everybody wins from inclusive design and accessibility, whether it's a curb cut, whether it's large print, whether it's appropriate lighting, whether it's a quiet and air-conditioned space in 110-degree heat temperatures today, whether it's accessible seating that has a back and arms. So as that arthritis starts to kick in, we can stand up, easily with our grandparents or our loved ones. And I think, when I think about my own journey, the Smithsonian's journey, sometimes I think back to young Ashley, and I think if there's one thing that either you wish you had known or one thing you would tell yourself, and my answer would actually be similar to Diane's, which is choice, right? I started my career here building these nationally and internationally recognized programs that are the gold standard in our field, but they're only one option. Yes, I stand by them and they're phenomenal. They're the best of the best, but they're one choice and one option. And how are we creating choices and options 365 days out of the year, not just when we have a designated access program or a designated access event? But I just wonder, is there anything that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self?
Yeah. The thing that I would tell my younger self is that you will make mistakes. I mean, we are human, we are imperfect, and we cannot do everything.
Yeah.
And just remind myself to stay humble. And so when I do make a mistake, whether it's I don't design a program correctly or whatever it might be, to listen to the visitor, to listen to the community, and with humility and with respect, and listen to what they're saying, and then just do better next time.
Yeah.
Because you will. I've gotten yelled at several times. And, I don't want to say I deserved to be yelled at, but I completely understand where those folks were coming from. It wasn't up to snuff. It wasn't the best that we could have done, partly because I just didn't know, and so I had to learn. And those are those learning opportunities. I wish I wasn't yelled at, but it happened.
But you took it,
Yeah.
You swallowed it, and you're better for it.
Exactly.
Right?
One of our fellow Access colleagues, Scott Artley, shout out Scott if you're watching, always says, if they're yelling at me, I know, or if they're complaining, I know that they're engaged. I know that they're a stakeholder, and it means to me that the visibility of access is working, and now I have something to build on. If I had to tell I'm going to not go far back to young, but I'm going to go back 10 years when I started working with Folklife. And I think the thing I would tell myself then is day one does not look like the last day of our events, because we learn so much. And it's not just an accessibility thing. I have watched my colleagues create wonderful plans for where the public will walk and stanchions and everything. And within seconds, we're like, yep, that's not happening. And and we have to take a deep breath and say, I will fix that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that even applies to not a temporary event, that day one does not look like, thing. And you learn things each time and you think, oh, I'm going to do this different next time.
Yeah. Amazing. Emma?
Yeah. I mean, I've only been at Cooper Hewitt for a little over a year, and one of the things that I think I learned very quickly, so even going back just a year, is that things often don't happen fast, and change doesn't happen fast.
Yeah.
Change happens very slowly over long periods of time. So doing what you can for what you have in your hands at that moment is perfectly okay. You're not going to be able to change a whole institution overnight, and keeping that in mind has been helpful.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank my amazing colleagues and panelists. I think we have plenty of time for questions. If there are questions in the room or if we've received any online, there are microphones in the room, and happy to take any that may have come in. Yes, we're waiting for a mic.
Hello. So my question is, are you involved in consulting the new museums that have not been built yet, and teaching and talking to them about universal design, and to be in on the ground floor as opposed to adapting perhaps a space like this. Thanks.
I'm laughing for folks online because the joke is that my office, the original Office of Visitor Accessibility, was located in this building, and it has its own fun accessibility tricks and things. So yes, I'm going to answer this centrally from an Office of Visitor Accessibility standpoint. Is that okay if I kick off? Yes, so the great news about OVA is we are a central office, and we're not a fee-for-service unit, which means museums don't have to budget to work with us. It's just a part of what we do every day. We've actually been working with the National Museum of the American Latino for almost 8 years at this point. Myself, my director, our inclusive design specialist, Michelle Cook, have been advising while they created their first 2 exhibits. One closed a few years ago, and the new salsa exhibit just opened. And that actually has been what we hope will become the model for inclusive design at the Smithsonian. When we're talking about creating new spaces, we fully anticipate the same will be for the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. I think that our goal in that role is, Diane talked about this a lot, is kind of learning alongside, never wanting to, reprimand our colleagues or give them this all-inclusive list of what needs to happen or shouldn't happen. It's learning together. Sometimes it's having a group of 10 user experts come in and test a digital prototype, and not a single thing works. And we learn from it. And then, thank heavens, we did that testing 2 months before the exhibition opens. So we're actually able to make those changes and make those improvements, and all future experiences are going to be better. So yeah, it's a very... I think that's actually one thing that is unique about the Smithsonian, is to have the accessibility office be as focused on design. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, last week we had a session about Starstruck, which is the immersive experience that the Smithsonian is mounting here in Washington, D.C., but also all around the globe. And Michelle Cook, your colleague, was a big part of that session because accessibility consideration was woven into that experience from the beginning. So if you haven't, please go back and make sure that you watch that, because it really talks about how accessibility was part of that journey from the beginning.
Exactly, yeah. Thanks for the plug, Diane.
Absolutely.
Are there other questions? Oh, yes, we have a hand over to the right.
Hi, great panel. This question is for Diane. I'm wondering, Diane, the festival is about living traditions, and so central to it are practitioners, whether they're craftspeople making something or musicians playing instruments or narrative sessions. I'm wondering if you can talk about what you've thought about and implemented, helped us all to understand and work towards when you're dealing with an event.
It's a flyover.
I'm going to pause you because we're having a military flyover over our building right now in conjunction with what's happening on the National Mall. So Marjorie, I got as far as practitioners and musicians.
Thinking about accessibility, knowing that that's the central mission and part of the festival, that we'll have participants sharing on the mall and how you can best make it an event for everyone through the work that you're doing and all of us.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that, right? There's a preparation. So it goes back to that conversation around how are you educating folks around accessibility. So I do create some information for our participants who come to the festival so that they have that information about what we're trying to do. We work with them to think about how are they making their work accessible. I find that most of the time everyone is totally into it. And it's really very powerful because I think the Smithsonian is really positioned in a way to have greater impact beyond just the experience. right? I think this is true for our visitors that come in as well. You know, if there is one person or one participant who comes and has this experience and experiences accessibility and then goes, that's really interesting, and goes back to wherever they've come from and thinks about accessibility a little differently, that's really wonderful. One of our collaborators, actually, for the People event, of the People initiative that we're having right now, was a participant in 2023 here at the Folklife Festival, and has really taken that work and woven it into the event that they are doing in Arkansas, right?
Amazing.
So that's really wonderful to think about how we are working with practitioners. And again, it's very different because it's not a static experience. So there is a level of how are we going to make this accessible? Okay, there's a musician, we need to get lyrics, we need to get things, and musicians sometimes are like, I'm going to go with the flow. Great, could you tell me approximately what that flow might be, right? So what, so it's, again, but we have to meet those practitioners where they are too. It's not about changing what they do. It's not about changing the art. It's not about changing the experience. It's about thinking creatively about how we create equitable engagement to that experience.
Amazing. Any other questions, either in the room or online? Oh, yes.
We do have a question from our live stream.
Great.
It's a question from Tori. What is your favorite part of this work?
So the question was, what is your favorite part of this work? Would anyone like to start?
Oh,
We may have to fly over.
Okay, I think we're good. Honestly, just like talking to people, talking to visitors that come in and enjoy our spaces is really honestly my favorite part of this work. We put in so much behind the scenes work and effort into everything. So even when I just go into the galleries and see someone reading our large print labels that we put out, and I go up and introduce myself and say, I hope you're enjoying your experience. Let me know if you have feedback, anything we can do for you, and just kind of having that face-to-face is wonderful. And then also people that come to our programs that really feel like they're part of the Smithsonian. At Cooper Hewitt, we like to say that our collection is your collection. We are a public, museum. The Smithsonian is everyone's museum. So it's really nice to come in and just see people having a good time, partly because of the accessibility work that we put in behind the scenes.
That's great. Jeff?
I think seeing repeat visitors. So when we provide a tour or the infrastructure in the building or whatever it may be, and then so those visitors having such a great time that maybe they wouldn't have had before had we not been prepared to meet them where they were, and then seeing them come back, and I think that's really something that happens a lot with us at SAM, and specifically with my job, because my orientation is doing specifically those gallery programs. So I get to build relationships with these folks, whether it's our participants in CME, or we have a lot of return visitors who are deaf, because we do a tour in ASL led by a deaf docent.
Yeah.
So it's also putting someone who other people might feel is disabled, or maybe putting them in a leadership position is, really great, and it builds that community, and it makes sure that people come back. That's my favorite part, is seeing the community and seeing how they really engage with the museum, and are, experiencing the museum itself.
Yeah. Diane?
I have two favorite parts. My first favorite part is that I get to work with all the different departments, and that satisfies my theater background. It satisfies my stage manager background of just being able to work, with technology, being able to work with creativity, being able to work with, all of that is great. But I think also some of my favorite moments are when I see folks come and feel like they can just be their authentic selves. They don't have to mask. They don't have to do extra legwork. They don't have to suppress who they are. There's a wonderful picture that we've been circulating through of one of our young visitors experiencing morning, what we call Morning on the Mall, which is morning at the museum, but it's just on the National Mall. And that picture is really, because that little peep is just being himself, right? He's just being himself and totally experiencing in the moment what's happening. And to me, that's really great. And we often hear that also from, we hear that from parents too, and families that are just, I could be my authentic self.
I'll answer after the flyover ends. I think very similar to what Diane and Emma and Geoffrey had said, working with colleagues from across the Smithsonian, they know I am a people person. I will talk with anyone. But for me, it actually is deeply personal. Thank you for the time check, seeing the evolution of colleagues, whether it's former students, whether it's user experts. The first round of interns I had in 2013, several of them still work at the Smithsonian, and one of them who works at the Postal Museum now helps work and facilitate the Morning at the Museum program at the Postal Museum as a former participant. About to get choked up here at the end. But truly, this work can really only do good. And we really are just trying to be human and create amazing opportunity and joy, and confidence and pride, and having people with disabilities have that pride and confidence in themselves.
And you see the next generation. That's
Correct.
What's exciting too, is that next generation of access workers that are going to take this work forward.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up today's panel. Thank you again to our organizers for hosting us. Thank you to everyone that tuned in person, online, and just thank you for the continued support. We love this work. Ashley?
Thank you, Ashley. Before I give my remarks, I just want to really shout out the amazing work that you all do here at the Smithsonian. I had the privilege of attending a See Me program 5 years ago. Actually, my colleague Vanessa from the Portrait Gallery is in the audience, and there are not enough words to explain how profound that experience was as an educator and interpreter. I just learned so much from the interaction, so thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists and our moderator, Ashley. I do want to make a correction. I said Ashley is at the Smithsonian Office of Visitor Affairs. That is not true. Ashley is at the Office of Visitor Accessibility. You'll have to excuse me,
I like
Ashley.
the fancy new title, Ashley. It's okay.
This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope it serves as a reminder that the Smithsonian is a place for everyone. Even airplanes, and that the lessons we learn in making our spaces more accessible, as our panelists have said, benefit not just some visitors, but all of them, essentially. To learn more about the work that is happening across the Smithsonian, please visit access.si.edu. It's going to be so fun in the recording. All right, I'd like to thank our stage manager, Rachel Cross, our audio engineer, Phil Speech, Troy Hannaford with Summit Webcasting, our ASL interpreters, Joy and Jamie, and Francisco, our live captioner from Houston. We hope that you can join us in person and online at 1 p.m. for our next session, The Future is Now, Reflections on the Promise of New Technologies. While you're here, we hope you'll post your favorite Smithsonian memories on the comment board back there at the back of the hall. In the rotunda here at the Arts and Industries Building, you can explore the Storied Objects exhibition showcasing artworks from past Smithsonian Folklife festivals. And in the marketplace, you can shop, meet the artists in residence, take hands-on workshops, and enjoy live broadcasts from the Radio Corner. In the West Hall, enjoy the exhibition, Voices and Votes, Exploring Democracy Across America. And if you go next door to the Smithsonian Castle, you can see American Aspirations, an exhibition inspired by the ideals expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Enjoy your visit. We hope to see you back here at 1 p.m.